Ms. Bauer, I understand that H-2B visa workers can't generally avail themselves of help from the Legal Services Corporation. And I am a civil rights and labor attorney by trade, so I find this very interesting. And I'm wondering if you can help flesh that out a little bit. Why can't LSC attorneys help H-2B visa holders?
The statute that imposes restrictions upon legal services funded entities lists categories of aliens who are eligible for legal services, and H-2B workers simply aren't on that list. So there may be some historical explanation for that, but it seems to us that there's no sort of ongoing justification for that position. H-2A workers are eligible for those services. They are routinely represented by LSC-funded organizations. There are only a handful of organizations like mine in the country that represent H-2B workers regularly, and we're basically being called upon to enforce to play the role that government should be playing with DOL and to play the role that the legal services lawyer should be involved in.
Do you think this restriction against not allowing H-2B visa holders to access legal services, do you think that that just harms the H-2B visa holders, or does it also impact the broader workforce?
It absolutely harms people other than the H-2B workers. Even if we said we don't care about those workers because those are foreign workers, and I don't suggest we should say that. But even if we said that, there is no doubt that having a class of workers who can be abused with impunity hurts U.S. workers. It hurts anybody who would want a job in that industry. And what we see, because there's no enforcement of worker rights in the H-2B system, is that wages in some of these industries have fallen, not just adjusted for inflation, but in real terms. And in some of these industries, people are, as a norm, earning less than the minimum wage, and that's because of that.
I also serve on the immigration subcommittee, and we had a similar panel where I asked everybody on the panel, do you think that our enforcement of labor laws in the United States is adequate? And all of the witnesses agreed no. And I said, I asked them, the next follow-up question was, do you believe that with more enforcement of our labor laws in this country, that we might be able to raise wages and working conditions in many of the industries where they say, American workers don't want to work? And all of them agreed that was the case. And I find it very interesting because I think at the heart of this, tension is the imbalance of power between employer and worker. And so I'd like to ask Secretary Marshall, if new workers in any proposed temporary worker program are reliant on their employers for their immigration status and their work authorization, how are those workers going to be expected to enjoy the same enforceable rights as other workers if they're dependent upon their employers for their?
It would be very hard. Well, in my experience, our laws depend very heavily, our labor laws depend very heavily on complaints by the affected workers. If they're afraid to complain, then you can't enforce the law very well with that strategy. That said, we had a program called the Employers of Undocumented Workers program. And what we did was vigorously enforce all the labor laws, not the immigration law, wherever we knew or had reason to believe that they were had heavy employment of the undocumented workers. We collected millions of dollars for violation of wage and hour laws, for example. We almost never found that anybody in those circumstances where any of the employers involved in those cases were observing the law and were involved in various kinds of ways to game the system. Now, so what I believe is that two things. One, we need to be more imaginative about law enforcement. And by that I mean we need to induce as much self-regulation as we can. And that can be, as in the case of the Ag Workers Bill, which would say that if you've got workers have their own organization, that you don't have to watch them as carefully as you would people who didn't. I believe we ought to have labor management committees in workplaces on safety and health, for example, because we're never going to protect the safety and the health of American workers through regulations and inspections. We're never going to have that many. But we can get the people at the workplace, and then you could use your regulatory resources to go after the worst offenders.